Hello everybody and welcome to my new YouTube channel, which as of this moment doesn't actually have a name, but I'm hoping by the time this video goes out I would have settled on a name. But for those of you that know me from my previous channel, Phoenix Fitness, welcome back. And for those of you that don't, my name is Matt and I have two main passions really, and that is fitness and reading. So I thought, why not make a channel where these two worlds collide? So I will continue making my fitness content and my gym vlogs, but I'll also be making standalone videos about books, and this will include book reviews, top 10 lists, rankings, across a variety of different genres, because I don't really have a standalone genre that I like. And I'm also open to suggestions about what books you want me to talk about and different genres that you want me to talk about. So I'm also going to try and amalgamate the two. So I very routinely listen to audiobooks in the gym anyway, so I thought why not discuss what I'm doing in the gym as well as what is going on in my ear in the form of the audiobook. So if, like me, you're really into your fitness, you like discovering new stories in the form of new books, then maybe this is the channel for you. So make sure you stick around and let's talk books. Jesus, look at my hair. Right, so before we get into the books, starting a bit of the fitness with a round of golf, and it started extremely well. As you can tell, I nearly just hold it. So tapping birdie, lovely start, getting out in the fresh air, nice bit of cardio, and then we'll get back and we'll start talking about some books. That is literally a foot. Tapping birdie, get in there, come on. Right, back from golf. Managed a pretty good round in the end. Shot 63, which sounds very impressive, but it was on the par 3, so par is 54, so it's 9 over. So for any of you that actually like golf, there's a little bit of golf content for you, and you'll probably be able to follow along with what I'm actually talking about. But for those of you that don't like golf, let's move swiftly on and talk about some books. So I thought it was only right that for the first video I talk about my top 10 favourite books of all time. Now, bear in mind, I've only massively been getting into reading over the last 3 or 4 years, so I haven't got a huge amount of books to actually draw from, because I've probably read between 100 to 150 books. So prior to the sort of 3 to 4 years of seriously reading, I was more of a casual reader and I wouldn't actually read a massive amount. So I've only got a few to draw from, but I still think I've got a pretty good list here. So without further ado, let's get into them. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the book itself. I'm just going to make 2 or 3 points about why I actually like the book and then move on, because otherwise it's going to be a super long video. So let's get into it. So the first book is 2001 Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. I kind of feel like Arthur C. Clarke is one of those OG writers of sci-fi, alongside Herbert with Dune. I feel like those two are like the original sci-fi writers. I could be wrong there might be loads more out there, but those are definitely the two that I kind of think of when I think of like old sci-fi writing. So this was written in 1968 and it's obviously based in 2001, and just briefly, it's about a monolith which appears on Earth just centuries and centuries ago, and then it kind of remains there, and it's about people discovering this and what it actually kind of means. So that's kind of the premise behind it. But there is a film that was made, an adaptation by Stanley Kubrick, and this is one of the examples where I actually saw the film before the book, and I definitely think that helped me visualize the book while I was reading it, and there's definitely a couple of those within my selection. Normally I like reading the book before I see the film, but on this occasion, because Stanley Kubrick put together such an amazing film, it really made me be able to visualize the book a lot more, and for that, I actually think it helped quite a lot. So I'd say this isn't really a character-driven book, because I actually can't remember any of the characters in it, but it's more just about the exploration over the centuries, and just the sort of overall sense of discovery. And it's, yeah, for those reasons, it sort of does hold a place in my heart, and yeah, it's why it's number 10 in my top 10 list. So second in my list is another book which I've actually seen the film before I've read the book, and that is The Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris. And this is the second in the trilogy of the Hannibal books. So it goes Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs, and then Hannibal, although I'm actually yet to read Hannibal. For some reason I kind of stopped at Silence of the Lambs just because I've got lots of other things I want to read. But I will get around to finishing the trilogy at some point. And this book is based off the character Hannibal Lecter, who is a serial killer, but he's also a doctor of psychiatry. And within this book, he is locked up and he is giving advice to an FBI rookie called Clarice Starling. And that's kind of where the story starts. And then there is another character within that called Buffalo Bill, and Clarice Starling is trying to hunt down Buffalo Bill with the help of Hannibal Lecter, and it's an unbelievably good book. There is a scene within this which is actually one of my favourite scenes in cinema history, and that is when Hannibal Lecter is moving to another prison and stuff goes down, and it's just unbelievably portrayed on film, but I think it's just as well portrayed in the book, and it's one of my favourite scenes, and it's absolutely chilling. So almost for that scene alone, this book is in my top 10. So this is number 9, Silence of the Lambs. So next up is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. Now this is a psychological thriller. It's kind of a short story, it's not very long, but this is also on Netflix, but this is one of the rare occasions where I've actually read the book before watching the Netflix film. So it's based off of a young girl that is going on a road trip with her partner, and she's going to go and meet his parents for the first time, and it just takes you on a psychological journey. It's really eerie, and that's kind of what I really like about it. You don't really know which way it's going, and I really like the ending. The ending was actually a lot more fulfilling than I thought it was going to be. So yeah, psychological thriller, short story. I read this in a couple of days, absolutely loved it, and that is why it is number 8 on my list. So next up is George Orwell's 1984. Obviously this is a very well-known book, and I read this a few years back and remember absolutely loving it. It's obviously very politically driven, sort of very dystopian, so based off of a future where totalitarianism has taken over. So things like thought crimes exist, so even thinking something can land you in a lot of trouble. There's a lot of sort of capitalism versus communism themes within it. Yeah, just a really, really good book. And the ending is absolutely harrowing, but yeah, I just remember thinking it was an absolutely amazing book for when it was written as well, which is in 1949. So obviously it's based off of a dystopian future, and yeah, it's just quite interesting sort of reading this now, just with the sort of the state of the world and the way that political divisions are going. Yeah, it's just quite an interesting one. So yeah, that is number 7 on my list. So next up at number 6 is another psychological thriller, and that is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. Like I said, psychological thriller, very twisty, very easy to read. So the writing style in this I remember being quite simple, so it was very easy to sort of get through the pages quite quickly because you kind of weren't dwelling on a lot of the language, and to be honest, the characters, again, I can't really remember the characters that well, apart from the patient herself. She was a very interesting character, and the psychiatrist or psychologist. Those are the sort of 2 main characters. So it's based off of a psychologist that is trying to work with a patient who is remaining silent after being convicted for her husband's murder. So that's kind of the premise of the book, and then it just gets a little bit twisty near the end. Absolutely love the twist. That's kind of what puts this book so high up for me, because I love a story where you think it's going one way and then it absolutely sideswipes you with a twist. So that's why this book is number 6 on the list. So at number 5 is a book which I read last year, and a book which is just being turned into a film which I really want to go and see, and that is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. So yeah, this was my favourite book from last year, and it is really high up in my overall books that I've read of all time, just because it's a very wholesome book. So I went into this thinking it was going to be some sort of sci-fi action adventure, which it is, but it's so much more than that. So it's based off of, so the premise behind the book is that a astronaut called Ryland Grace, who isn't actually an astronaut, I think he's a teacher, but he has been drafted to go and save humanity because something called astrophage is eating away the sun's energy, and he needs to go and find another source of this in order to save the planet. So he embarks on his mission to go and do this, and that's where all of the sci-fi and action sort of takes place. And that's something that Andy Weir is actually very good at, just to sidetrack quickly, just around the sort of science behind everything. He's obviously done a lot of research around kind of the science and stuff, because that makes it very believable, which I quite like in a sci-fi book. I like it when it's not just very far-fetched, but when they can actually put a lot more detail into things. I really like that. So yeah, where was I going with this? I've been sidetracked. So as I was saying, it's not just a sci-fi adventure book, and maybe a little spoiler alert here, he meets a little alien chap called Rocky along the way, and that's where their relationship sort of develops, and it becomes a lot more of a human connection book than anything else. And I think that's why I actually fell in love with this book, because it's more than just that action adventure, because that's been written 1,000 times. It is about the connection between this alien species and Ryland Grace, and the way that Andy Weir writes that and builds that connection is so wholesome that yeah, this book is definitely one of the best books I've ever read, and why it's number 5 in my list. So next up isn't a standalone book, and I've slightly cheated here because it is a trilogy, and probably one of the most famous fantasy trilogies known to man, and that is The Lord of the Rings. So The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and Return of the King. I think if I was to pick one of these, it would probably be The Fellowship of the Ring as my favourite book out of the 3, just because this was what introduced me to Tolkien's world and introduced me to these amazing characters, and just started creating that world building. But to be honest with you, I think if I was to choose one of the books as a standalone, it would be a little bit higher up my list of my top 10, because although I love The Lord of the Rings and I do love fantasy books, yeah, there's just a couple other books in here which, for whatever reason, I rank higher. But yeah, amazing. I read these a few years back, and I remember it being 3 months of wholesome reading, and one of the best sort of reading experiences that I've ever had. So absolutely love these books. Amazing world building by Tolkien, amazing characters, but I'm not going to go into the detail about the story itself, because there's other YouTube channels which will be able to articulate it a lot better than me, so I would refer you to them. But as a 3 book, as a trilogy, this is number 4 in my list of the greatest books that I've ever read. Now then, my top 3. So as you can probably tell, I'm a massive Stephen King fan, so I've read close to 40 Stephen King books, so I would be remiss to not have him in my top 10. However, I have just put it down to, I've limited myself to 3 of his books rather than more, because I was thinking about putting the Dark Tower series in, but again, although there are a couple of standalone books I really love in the Dark Tower series, Wizard and Glass, Drawing of the Three, incredible books. But to me, it has to be the entire series which makes kind of that experience. So I can't have, what is it, 6 or 7 books in there. So I've decided to not put any of the Dark Tower series books in, but I have got 3 books which are all by Stephen King, which are my top 3 favourite reads of all time. So let's get into the top 3. So at number 3, it is 11/22/63 by Stephen King, and this is based on the assassination of JFK. So a character called Jake Epping finds a portal in a cafe, and he is sent back to before the assassination of JFK, and he realizes it is his mission to essentially try to prevent this from happening. And again, although this is an amazing sort of sci-fi book about time travel, historic book, it ends up being so much more than that, and it's a wholesome, romantic book, to be honest with you. I didn't think that Stephen King could really create sort of romance. I think he has done that in a few of his other books, which I think are really good, where he can build that, but for whatever reason in this one he just absolutely nails it. It's got a little bit of everything in there. I wouldn't say so much horror, it is more just sort of that sci-fi and that romance. It is a glorified romantic book. The characters, again, absolutely amazing. He builds those characters so well in this, and sometimes I find with Stephen King he's not very good at ending books, but I feel like this comes to a really good conclusion as well. So overall, this is an absolutely amazing book, and it is in my top 3 books of all time, and as you'll see now, it is in my top 3 Stephen King books of all time. So at number 2 is The Stand by Stephen King. I haven't read this for a very long time, but remember just being absolutely absorbed by it. It is around about 1,300 pages long, so it's a bit of a chonker, but I remember just reading this probably in the space of a month and just absolutely blitzing through it. And I'm not a very quick reader, so to get through a 1,300 page book in a month is quite quick for me. Yeah, just got so much in it. The character development is incredible. There's so many characters within it, and it goes from... So for any of you that haven't read The Stand, I'll give you a little bit of a premise to what it is. So the world encounters a terrible virus called Captain Trips, and it very quickly spreads across the globe. And as people start dying, sorts of different factions start forming. So eventually it ends up in two groups, so a dark side and a light side, led by two main characters. It's Randall Flagg, and I can't remember the name of the good side. I will put it up in a minute, but essentially they start gathering forces, and it concludes with them going head to head against each other. But the way that King actually builds that over the 1,300 pages and kind of develops the characters and makes you fall in love with a lot of the characters is just absolutely incredible. I do remember thinking that the ending wasn't as good as it could have been. I do feel like he could have ended it a little bit better. Obviously I won't give any spoilers, but I kind of feel like he kind of just thought, we'll just do this. So there's like a big event that happens, and we'll just throw that in there, and then you can kind of make up your minds about why that happens. But yeah, an absolutely amazing book. It was one of the first Stephen King books that I read, and it was one of the first books, like big books, that I read when I was getting back into reading. So it really holds a very dear place in my heart, essentially. Right then, we've got down to the final book of the 10. And drumroll please, it is, you've guessed it, a Stephen King book. This is an epic horror book, but to me it's more than just a horror book. For me, this is a coming of age story, and I think it's probably one of those kind of original coming of age stories. So it's that classic genre, the boys on bikes. So this book is kind of separated out into two generations, really. So it starts in 1957 with the Losers Club. So they form after a tragedy happens where Georgie, who is Bill's younger brother, dies at the hands of Pennywise the Clown. So following on from that, the group get together because they all start experiencing scary things because of this entity, which is Pennywise. And eventually they do manage to defeat the clown, only for it to come back in 27 years. So as part of the Losers Club pact, they said that if the clown was to ever come back, then they would promise to come back and fight it again, and that's exactly what happened. So it's kind of split up into two parts, where it's the Losers Club when they're younger, and that is all the sort of coming of age story, and then them as adults where they come back again to fight the clown one last time. So it is an absolute epic. It is a horror story, so there is kind of like body horror in there, graphic horror, but it also creates a lot of suspense as well. And to be honest with you, because this is one of the first Stephen King books I ever read, it does hold a very dear place in my heart, but it's more than just because of that. So this book in particular, my dad owned a copy of. He actually owned one of the first editions of this, and I remember it sitting pride and place on a bookshelf in our family home back in London. And I just remember sort of always looking at the front cover because it was a picture of the clown, so Pennywise the Clown on the front, and always remember just picking it up and looking at it and just being fascinated by it, but never having read it because I was too young to sort of want to read it, or just like, it was just too long for me to properly understand it, I guess. But just knowing that my dad owned that and that he would have read that at some point, like, that's quite a nice feeling for me, because for any of you that don't know, my dad passed away when I was 18, and I never really got to experience or talk to him about some of like the things that I'm now into, because I was just a young man. But now that I'm getting into like my own hobbies and things like that, it would have been nice to be able to talk to him about that. And knowing that he would have read this and probably had similar experiences to me reading it, it's quite a nice feeling. But yeah, this was one of the first Stephen King books that I read alongside The Shining, and yeah, it really did introduce me to what an epic book could be. And again, I remember absolutely consuming this, going through it in the space of a month or something again. And it just made me want more of Stephen King's worlds, and hence why I've now gone on to own probably close to 50 or 60 of his books and read about 40 of them. So one of my lifetime goals is to read every single Stephen King book. So yeah, I try to sort of read a Stephen King book every other month, so hopefully in the next few years I will get through all of them, and then obviously I'll do something like a ranking of all my favourite Stephen King books. But yeah, this is the one that really set that ball rolling, and that is Stephen King's It. So just before I go, I wanted to do a couple of honourable mentions because these came very close to entering the top 10 list as well. So the first one is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. So I read this book a couple of years ago. It's a very eerie psychological thriller. I'm not going to go through kind of what the book is about, but I would recommend reading it. It's one of those sort of classic books that actually was an inspiration for a lot of Stephen King's writing, and that definitely shows because I'm actually reading Bag of Bones by Stephen King at the moment, and he references Rebecca and Mandalay, which is the home of Max de Winter, which is what the book is based off of. He references that a lot within the book, so yeah, you can see why, because it's got definite traits of Stephen King within this. So that's definitely one of them. And then finally, Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. So Jurassic Park is one of my favourite films of all time, and the book is just as good. So I mentioned earlier about Andy Weir creating a world where science fiction is very believable, and he does a lot of research behind the science. Michael Crichton trumps that because some of the science within this is so mind-boggling. It makes you think that this could actually happen in real life. So he's obviously done a lot of research on like genetics and genomes and that sort of thing, in DNA, and it just makes the book so much more interesting because it feels more believable. So it's something that doesn't really, or it does get mentioned in the film quite a lot, but it goes into so much detail in the book that makes you appreciate it even more. So again, an honourable mention. Didn't quite make the top 10, but yeah, one of my favourite books of all time, Jurassic Park. So there we go, guys, that is my first video complete. I hope you've enjoyed it. Sorry it might have been a little bit clunky in places, just as I'm getting used to talking to the camera about books rather than fitness. So it's a different style of video for me, so something that I have to get used to, so please bear with me as I kind of get better at communicating and articulating in these types of videos. But I hope you've enjoyed it anyway. Let me know if you plan to read any of these books, or if you have read any of these books. And yeah, happy reading. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.